Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session that I've gone on today. And I hope you've been enjoying the last 2 or 3 days of our virtual summit. And appreciate that many of you have probably spent some evenings watching our material and that we put together for you. But hopefully, if you learned something, and hopefully, you can learn something in this session as well. So, my name's Robert Dobson. For those of you who don't know me, I head up our technology partners here at Device Authority, and I'm going to be here talking to you today about resilience by design, or more specifically, talking about cyber resilience and why it's important for your businesses and why you should consider that. So, I do have a few slides, but if you do have questions, please post them in the chat window, and I'll do my best to answer those at the end once we get to that. Let me just bring up the slides that I have, so hopefully you can all see this. So yeah, so let's talk about resilience by design and cyber resilience by design. But before we get into that, I always like to look at some of the interesting cartoons or memes that are out there. I always sort of pick one or two which seem to be quite interesting. This one here, actually, on the left-hand side, I picked it out because it's got a couple of dinosaurs. I know a few of those around, um, and the guy on the right is clearly reading a business continuity plan, a disaster recovery plan, and recognizing that the guy on the left has brought this to him. And but he's saying, "Wow, I've been here 23 million years and nothing's happened yet." And meanwhile, in the background, there's an asteroid about to wipe them off the planet. You could argue there's no business plan in the world or disaster recovery plan that's going to prevent that happening, but you kind of get the analogy. Anyway, that's quite an interesting one. This one's probably more pertinent, and some of you might be familiar with this. So there's an IT department guy on the left-hand side, and this guy is rocked up and said, "Hey, did we have a disaster recovery plan?" And clearly, he might be working in an industrial plant or something like that, and maybe it's set on fire. And the IT department guy's going, he looks a bit shocked, to be honest. But anyway, always looked to, nice to look at those types of things. Anyway, let's um, let's move on. So when we think about sort of cyber resilience in the context of operational resilience, it's the bigger picture here is all about how do you build operational resilience into your businesses, and cybersecurity and security is one element of that, right? So you can see here actually security here on one of the bubbles. Actually, I pulled this from a company called Wavestone. This is a chart that they put up, and it's got a number of facets to it, right? It's got suppliers, and I think we've seen over the last 18 months, 2 years, or maybe longer, actually, some of the supply chain challenges around automotive, for example, the chip shortages and things like that. Well, back to operational resilience again. Security, cybersecurity, we'll be talking about that in a bit more detail. People, culture, technology. Do you have outdated technology, new technology coming in? Change management as well as part of your business continuity plans, strategy and governance, premises. I thought that was an interesting one. Premises, given that if you're doing manufacturing and the roof's falling off, then clearly that's going to be a challenge to maintain the continuity in your business. But clearly our focus will be on cybersecurity, but it's an element of that operational resilience. And in a nutshell, cybersecurity, or cyber resilience, I should say, is the ability for organizations to prepare for, respond to, and recover from cyber attacks and security breaches. It's key to operational resilience and business continuity. And we've seen, various cyber attacks. Don't think there's a day go by where there's some kind of attack or breach where a company's been taken offline, for example. And resilience by design, as part of that, it shifts the focus to the forefront of product and service design to ensure that resilience is considered part of the entire change life cycle. So, it's gone to the age where you can just say, hey, I've built in loads of security in my products and my devices, job done, I can forget about it now. It doesn't work like that these days. You have to think about what happens when somebody compromises that device or compromises your infrastructure. So it's things like devices, they're only secure when they aren't, right? And we all know that people find vulnerabilities on a whole bunch of devices and equipment, and at that point in time, it's not secure. So it's all about then what do you do about that? So why do we need cyber resilience? Well, I thought I'd talk about some of the recent sort of attacks. In fact, I pulled this out of from the presentation I did a couple of months ago uh, at a European Investment Federation casting conference, where these guys, if you don't know what investment casting is, it's all about how do you go from wax molds in a factory through to pouring molten metal, then through to getting the components. And these guys are, making components for things like vehicles, cars, aerospace, military, whatever it may be. And what they're doing is then having these big digital transformation programs um, to then take their business into the next level, sort of industrial 4.0 type of ethos, basically to improve processes, yield, and all those kinds of things. But the challenge they've got is that they don't have any expertise in cyber and so forth, so they're looking at how they build this out. And clearly, what's happening in the manufacturing centres now is there's a lot of focus on attacks, and this actually is all about ransomware attacks. In this article I pulled from Dragos, in fact, they recognise that there was a jump of about 107% in ransomware attacks from 2021 to 2022 on the manufacturing sector. And also, that ransomware in this industry in manufacturing was was a favourite target for critical infrastructure and its industrial control systems. And actually, only I think back at the end of 2022, this was actually an Italian company called the EMA, which is it's translated as European Aerospace Microfusions, and they're part funded by Rolls-Royce, or part owned by Rolls-Royce, and they do high-end component manufacturing for in this investment casting world for all kinds of plane manufacturers, military, aerospace, and so forth. And actually, they had a cyber attack at the end of last year, which took all their computer systems offline for a significant amount of time, 4 to 5 days, I believe. And their workers had to go on. You can see in the title it says "workers still in SIGs." SIGs in Italian, from what I understand, is that they're off work. And it took them quite a lot of time to restore the computers so that actually the production could carry on. So it took the production lines off for quite a significant amount of time. Whether it's industrial espionage and IP theft, I think the jury's out on that one. So still to be decided. So clearly, we're talking about some of the threats there from a ransomware point of view. But there's more threats than that from a cybersecurity, right? So you've got phishing attacks, you've got ransomware, yes, you've got safety. There's big safety concern on a lot of what we get involved with, from things like industrial equipment or medical or even automotive, right? There's a big safety implication there. IP theft, supply chain attacks, DOS sabotage. I kind of see the production lines going offline as a DOS in some kind of weird way. Data leaks, nation state attacks. Unfortunately, nation state attacks are on the rise because of some of what's going on in Ukraine and the geopolitical tensions across the world as well. And malware, and this is just to name but a few, right? So these cyber threats are growing for businesses, and um, having that resilience in the back of your mind has got to be the forefront to help protect against those threats that are ever growing. And then you start to think about, well, there's this new technology coming along, and people embracing things like AI and big data, and you think about that in the context of cyber resilience and operational resilience. You then have to think about what are the threat or new attack types in that sort of AI domain. Well, clearly, I mean, I pulled this from Gartner. So things like model theft, that's a potential threat. There's model interference. So is somebody going to tamper with the AI model outcome manipulation? So is someone trying to manipulate the output of the model, to do something nefarious with it? Data poisoning, and we have this analogy in device authority called, it's all about, if you can't trust the device, how can you trust the data? Imagine you've got a million devices feeding data into an AI engine, and those devices are not trustworthy, and the data off them is not trustworthy. You get garbage in, garbage out. So not a good state of affairs. And it's an important thing to note there, right? Is that you need to make sure you have these robust, resilient systems to ensure that as we move forward with the new technology, that they are fit for purpose and so forth. Anyway, it's another sort of dichotomy to sort of scratch your head around. And then so today's use cases as well. they demand a resilience by design approach just from the nature of them. We're not talking about computers and laptops typically, and we get involved with projects. We say that we're IoT, right? But it's more than IoT. It's like engines in vehicles or telematic control units that connect to the cloud via from the vehicle, or it could be an industrial plant, or it could be a medical piece of equipment, farming, agriculture, wherever it may be, or perhaps even inside supply chain where you need to be able to secure the manufacturing site. But actually, all of those types of things, you need to be able to put this into the head, this concept around resilience by design from the outset, right? Just to be able to build that, make sure the safety and prevent injury of people using those use cases and projects or products or whatever, protect the IP, um, prevent disruption to services, be able to recover quickly. So if there is a problem with the product or the vehicle's TCU, how do you recover from that? How do you respond from those? And the challenge has always been in this type of world is around automation, right? Because of the sheer number of devices that are out there, is to, unless you've got automation, you can't manage all of them manually. You have to be able to provide automation to support that the sheer scale of devices that are out there. So clearly, today's use cases demand that resilience by design approach, and through the device's life cycle and through the product's life cycle, not just fire and forget and say, hey, I've done my bit. So interesting to think about that. And I did just want to touch on the growth and vulnerabilities and exploits as well, because that's a big running topic and theme. And when you think about that from the concept of cyber resilience, you're never going to have a secure product all the time through the lifetime of the product, right? People are always going to find vulnerabilities in your product. It's about how you manage the product and how you deal with potential disasters post if you manage to if you happen to get a breach, for example, or someone's attacking your particular infrastructure because there's a vulnerability on it. And the challenge becomes bigger because when you think about IoT type projects, in fact, I pulled this report from Unit 42. Um, they recognize that there are a whole bunch of exploits that are network scanning, remote code execution, SQL injection, 0 days, whatever. So 41% is exploits. 33% are malware, so worms, ransomware, backdoor trojans. 26% is around user practice or bad practice, right? So things like passwords, phishing, cryptojacking. I would hope that we're moving away from this scenario of default username and passwords because of all the types of attacks that have been instrumented because of that. But we'll see. We found actually, but in this report, they found that while the vulnerabilities of IoT devices make them easy targets, they are most often used as a stepping stone for a lateral movement, so into other systems and networks. And so the easy entry point is that IoT type device, and it's got a weak security posture, so I can get on that, compromise it, then perform a lateral movement to another system, which is where I really want to get to from an attacker point of view. And I think the story is made easier when you look at the sheer number of vulnerabilities that are found on a daily basis, right? So you've got, last year there was 25,227 vulnerabilities, or 485 a week. Actually, I pulled this from a company called CVE Details. They update it regularly. And you can see actually there's 13,401 vulnerabilities found in 2023 to date. I updated this chart, I think it was yesterday. So you can see it's on target to be more this year than it was last year, and there's a growing trend here. And the reason there's a growing trend, right, is because there's more products being produced, there's more software being produced, there's new updates in the software, and so forth. So that's it's a growing trend, and it will be. And so it's interesting how that's going to develop. And then you've got people like Enisa who are looking at supply chain attacks, and actually they produced a report a couple of years back and trying to identify where the key sort of attack vectors are. And 66% of attacks focus on the supplier's code. Well, when you look at the chart to the left and realize, well, there's a good reason for that, right? It's because there's a sheer number of vulnerabilities there, and there's an easy entry. You can find a vulnerability on a product which is inside a critical supply chain, and hey, you go after that, right? As a a nefarious actor. 58% of attacks aimed at access data, 62% on trusted customers and their suppliers, 62% of attacks rely on malware. But if you dig into the detail, then fourth one down is exploiting software vulnerabilities, and this is where I think the concept of SBOM's coming, right? So for those of you who don't know what SBOM is, a software bill of materials, and I do have a bit more detail around that in a bit. And it's a growing theme, right? Because the sheer number of vulnerabilities out there, you have to be able to manage them and be able to mitigate them in your infrastructure. And then you think about automotive. We did quite a lot in automotive actually, and I was on a call. I think it was last week. It was for those users in cyber world. It was called SBOM. There's a guy called Alan Freeman who heads up the SBOM for I think it's CISA. And one of the guys from Auto ISAC was on there sort of showing some diagrams. This one came up, and and then I thought, well, crikey, there's a lot of components inside vehicles, and the average number of chips inside a vehicle is 1,500, rough and tough, 1,500. You think about, well, if there's 1,500 chips inside a vehicle, do they all carry software? Maybe not all of them, but a big proportion of them would. Maybe they don't all connect inside the vehicle, but perhaps a big proportion of them do. But the thing here is that there is a big number of chips inside that vehicle carrying software. So then it's back to that vulnerability slide again, right? So how do you manage those vulnerabilities and mitigate risk in that type of environment? And then you throw in vehicle to vehicle communications, and then it becomes even more interesting, right? To understand what the cyber resilience aspect of an automotive vehicle is, and how do you manage that operational resilience and cyber resilience in that context. And time will tell on that, but I know there's various organizations out there looking to address that. So, and then you've got legislation that's catching up, and specifically around things like software bill of materials and zero trust. The president Joe Biden came out with an executive order in May 21 called 14028, which called for zero trust. It also called for software bill of materials, and it also called for collaboration. And the whole point to this was to really address some of the challenges around, the sheer number of vulnerabilities out there, and also how to provide visibility through the supply chain and improve the cybersecurity standpoint of anything going in critical infrastructure, and improve that whole scenario. You then got the Cyber Resilience Act, which came out at the end, well, September last year, and it's directly focusing on those manufacturers of products with digital elements. So anyone that's got producing a product with a digital element that's providing it into end business supply chains, they have to then adhere to this new Cyber Resilience Act. It's going through proposal phase right now, but I've actually got a timeline on this I'll show you in a bit. But there's two aspects to this. There's the security requirements relating to the properties of products with digital element. So products shall be designed, developed, and produced in such a way that they ensure an appropriate level of cybersecurity based on the risk. Products with digital elements shall be delivered without any known exploitable vulnerabilities. Wow, that's a big one in itself. Going back to that vulnerability chart I showed you before. Be delivered with a secure by default configuration. Protect the confidentiality of stored, transmitted, or otherwise processed data. Ensure protection from unauthorized access, including but not limited to authentication, identity, or access management systems. Well, that's just a few points I pulled out there, right? And the second part to this was around manufacturers must comply with essential vulnerability requirements. So there's this thing. The first bullet in there is document vulnerabilities and components of a product, including by drawing up a software bill of materials in a commonly used and machine readable format. Being able to remediate vulnerabilities without delay. Disseminate security patches without delay and free of charge. So there's an onus on the product manufacturers to patch and provide patches so that the end users can fix those products, to mitigate risk in their supply chains. I would encourage you to go and read this because it's very interesting read. Then it got me thinking. We're a UK-based company. We've got a very heavy presence in the US, and we've got various sites around the world. But clearly we have a presence in the UK. So what's the UK government doing? And it's like, well, I often wonder what they're doing, to be honest. But in the context of cybersecurity and resilience, they did put out a call for review for software resilience and security for businesses and organizations. That ended in May 1st. So clearly they are looking at how to respond in this new world and what businesses should be doing to build in resilience, um, and to improve the landscape where they operate. Anyway, interesting times there. And just to touch on the timeline for the Cyber Resilience Act, this is something I pulled from the European Commission actually. The proposal was out on the 15th of September. It's been going through review and so forth since then. There's the European parliamentary elections in June 2024, where there's the basically the EU Cyber Resilience Act is going through a phase that's going to be ratified or at least put in front of the European parliamentary elections before. And then there'll be a standardization request that companies then start to adhere to this over a 2-year period. So then businesses are going to need to react to this beyond 2024. So that's going to be interesting to see how businesses react to this new legislation. So interesting to see what happens there. And then just to touch on software bill of materials, they have a massive part to play, in my view. And for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a bit like I've got on the left-hand side here a Coca-Cola bottle, and it's a list of ingredients. It's not the real thing. It's just listing out the components or the ingredients on the product. And from a for a an end product is saying, well, what software's on that product, what the components used, and so forth, and what the versions of the libraries, etc. And what does it give? Well, it provides clearly component visibility through the supply chain. So back in the EU Cyber Resilience Act, it's like Mr. Product Manufacturer builds a software bill of material, then hands the SBOM to a would-be end user, so that then they've got visibility. Okay, I know what software's in my ecosystem. I know what's in my infrastructure now. I can then manage that. I know what I need to do. I know what if I get a vulnerability come along. Great, I've got visibility. I know what's in there. Whereas before, they had no clue about what software's in there. So if you don't know what's in there, what do you do about it? So this means you can respond quickly to new vulnerabilities, provide threat intelligence, remediation management and automation. This one's interesting, IP license management and analysis. Actually, one of the original use cases of inventory of software was the legal counsel. The legal counsel wanted to know what software is running in a product, just for license infringement reasons and litigation. So, interesting one there. EUL awareness for out-of-date and old software components. So there's quite a lot of benefit there to these SBOMs. It's not a silver bullet to solve all the vulnerability challenges, right? It's just it helps to mitigate risk if you put certain things in place. So, what can you do? How can you build resilience into your businesses? Well, there's a number of frameworks and guidelines out there. This is a very well-known framework. It's called the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. It talks about 5 key segments. Those are identify asset management, business environment, governance, risk assessments, risk management, understand what's in your infrastructure. Protect, put in access control, awareness and training, data security, maintenance, protect technology and so forth. Detect, so detect anomalies on your network, perhaps security monitoring and continuous monitoring, right? So it's not just fire and forget. You continuously monitor what's going on in your infrastructure. Respond, so having response planning, communication, analysis, mitigation, improvements, and then having recovery. So back to that original slide that I showed you, that cartoon slide, right? Having a recovery plan or disaster recovery plan. What do you do when it goes really bad? How do you recover from that? What's your backup recovery plan, for example? Those types of things. So having these types of things in place, processes and policies can help you build resilience into your business and also build cyber resilience into your business. So something to take away and have a look at is a really good framework there. But equally, in the UK, we've got the National Cybersecurity Centre. They've put out 10 steps to cyber resilience, and it covers everything from risk management, take a risk-based approach to securing your data and systems, engage in training, so collaboratively build security that works for people in your organization, design, build, and maintain and manage systems securely. So yeah, don't put insecure systems in your infrastructure and your businesses. Why would you do that? Vulnerability management again. Keep your system protected throughout their life cycle. Understand what software is running in your in your businesses and systems. Being able to get visibility about what vulnerabilities you have on those systems at any given moment in time is really critical to how you make decisions about what you need to patch and when. What's the criticality of those vulnerabilities? Identity access management, control who and what can access your systems and data. I mean, we work all the time in IoT and OT types of use case, and it's all about how do you trust the devices, how can you authenticate them to make sure they are trustworthy, and provide authorization control of those devices into your applications and use cases in infrastructure. Back to that one again, data security there as well. That protect data where it is vulnerable. Um, Again, AI could fit within that bucket. Supply chain security, collaborate with your suppliers and partners. So yeah, interesting one. Encourage you to go and read this. It's good to look at. Then from our side, from Device Authority, we have this product called Keyscaler, 7.0 version now, and we're helping to create sustainable supply chain. So if you look at us on the NIST cybersecurity framework, we have, we work in all the segments. Number one is generating a strong root of trust. So through device bound machine identity, so creating that fundamental foundation for zero trust. Number two is automating zero trust by enforcing authentication policy. So unifying IT and OT, so being able to protect those devices connected to the infrastructure. Integrate with leading detection platforms for real-time threat assessments at each device authentication session. Actually, we've done a partnership with a company recently called Cyfirma. In fact, they've been on presenting on this virtual summit on a panel, and they have some really interesting technology where they can analyze the dark web for chatter. So you give them your domain names, and they will go away and build a big report and understand with their tools what the chatter is on the dark web, and use that as analysis. So you can say, "Hey, Mr. CISO, there's a whole bunch of devices which that lots of people, nefarious people on the dark web are talking about being able to try and compromise. You might want to do something about it." So we're doing some integrations around there to help provide that elevated visibility and management capability. Coupled with those guys, it's interesting. Number four here is automate threat mitigation across device groups, so improving response time with our technology. When you think about the sheer number of devices out there, how do you do that? From an IT standpoint, becomes a bit of a challenge. And number five is quickly recover, right? So quickly renew device credentials and securely deliver updates. As part of our capability, we can help with that process of getting secure updates to the edge devices in a fast and speedy way, and it's reducing recovery time, right? So back to the whole resilience piece again, right? Is how do you recover from those problems when they occur, and mitigate those, plan for those types of actions. Yeah, so that's how we fit. We've done a lot over various use cases. This one's actually an interesting one. Big company that we work with, and they do a lot of diesel engines. And what they wanted to be able to do is have a digital transformation program where they want to connect all these things up to their cloud application and manage those through the lifetime of the product to be able to renew credentials, provide and update software securely to their ECUs on an ongoing basis, because they're planning for resilience, right? They're building in this capability so they can mitigate any potential threat. And one of the fundamental things you need to do is be able to patch those devices, so there will be vulnerabilities found, and be able to do that securely without delay. So hence why some of the capability that they're using from us in there. This one's an industrial supply chain. Actually, is a manufacturing supply chain, and one of the key things here is to manage very sensitive key material from a data center to multiple factory sites and ensure that the automation is in place to support that, and it's speeding up instant response, minimizing customer disruption, preserving brand reputation, reducing liability, and so forth. So really, really interesting business there actually is in the automotive space, supplying to the tier one OEM. So very critical infrastructure piece there. So resilience is a fundamental part of their play. And then I guess the last one here before we close out is public safety. So emergency communications. This is all about next generation emergency communication devices. And actually, the company here had a sensors connected at the edge and wanted to be able to um, integrate with external threat intelligence platforms to keep up to date with known CVEs, being able to manage their edge gateways and the sensors beyond that, to mitigate any potential threat by patching the devices as soon as they can, by having that known inventory of threats and vulnerabilities connected to that vulnerability management capability. And clearly, there's a sheer number of devices in here which, you know, we help automate the credentials and certificates to those edge devices into the cloud apps. So it's a big thing for that company. Anyway, hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour around cyber resilience, where it fits within the greater landscape of operational resilience. And if you do want to talk to me some more about this, I'm happy to talk to you about that. You can reach out to my LinkedIn code. You can just scan my LinkedIn QR code on here now, or reach out to me via email, and I would happily connect to you and have a chat. So let's just have a look to see whether there's any questions. There might be one here. Um, So, what are your thoughts about AI and ML potentially altering the NIST framework by automated detect and respond? Oh, God, that's an interesting one. Um, Clearly, I think there will be some changes, and I think there'll be changes more generally around AI and ML because of the capabilities that that brings. When you think about AI and quantum computing, the mind boggles there for me actually is what's going to happen once those two get put together. But from a NIST framework point of view, I think there will be some changes that come out to support the AI and ML type of capability. And you will see that no doubt in due course. That looks like probably the only question. If you do have any other questions you want to reach out to me, feel free to do that, and I will do my best to answer. Hopefully, you've learned something in this session, um, and and I just wish you a really lovely rest of the day and evening or morning, wherever you are. And for me, that's an over and out. And thank you very much for listening. Goodbye for now.